usually when I'm asked to speak to a group like this, it's to talk about those guys right there. What College Summit has done is we've become the largest college-going culture builder in U.S. high schools by tapping into one of the most powerful of human forces, the power of peer influence. So we ask, who's most influential to a 17-year-old? I think the answer for any of you who have been parents or grandparents is, and not his mom, it's other 17-year-olds. And what we do, in the same way that Teach for America is driving education reform through teachers, and KIP is leading education reform through schools, College Summit is driving education reform through the most influential students in America's toughest high schools. We find these influencers, we train them, and then we deploy them in the schools to bring college know-how, higher expectations, tenacity, in the most compelling way possible, which is peer-to-peer. So you can see that I'm passionate about this issue, but I'm actually not going to talk about it. What I'd like to talk about is really building on this morning's conversation, and I think something that's on so many of our minds, which is the economy. As you all understand, for the foreseeable future, there is going to be fewer and fewer public discretionary dollars available to tackle the toughest issues facing us. Take a look at that dark blue line. That's discretionary dollars projected out to be dipping starting in 2012, at the same time that the mandatory entitlement spending, the dotted line, is going up. So either we are going to see our education worsen, our poverty deepen, or we are going to figure out a way to have more impact with fewer dollars. I'd like to propose a strategy for a conversation, or for some back and forth later today, which is a strategy around building a market based on results. The American people, in terms of their philanthropic giving, and I know I'm talking about most of you here in the room, and in terms of their tax contributions, and I know I'm talking about most of you here in the room, are uniquely generous. Well, what if those dollars flowed to what works in social change as efficiently as our dollars flow to what's profitable in the stock market? One of the reasons that our financial flow is so efficient in the for-profit sector is because investors have access to public information on performance for publicly traded companies. As many of you know, these are called screen-based markets because investors can look at screens and Bloomberg boxes and see how companies across entire industries are doing in performance and use that data to compare and make choices. Well, part of what's holding up our social change progress is that we're not able to do that. We don't have that common data source for results in the social change sphere. And so, as a result, we've got a lot of dollars, $1.55 trillion in terms of discretionary federal dollars, as well as philanthropic dollars, that are not being spent as effectively as we'd like them, and frankly, we need them to be. Well, what if there were that common data source on results? Could we actually see those dollars going into what works? Could we actually see philanthropists, as well as public officials at the state and federal level, being able to look at the data and direct the dollars to strategies, initiatives, organizations that are more effective? Is this just a pipe dream? No. We can actually create this market based on results in the college access and success field, which is the field I work in, and it's a field I know many of you are involved in. And we can do that with some investment in the next 3 years. So let me sketch out what this might look like. So what's already in place? Well, first off, we've got an important issue: college access and success. According to research, the #1 driver of urban economic growth in the United States is the college attainment rate of the adult population. Communities that have a higher percentage of college graduates have stronger economies than communities with lower percentage of college graduates. The trouble is, in the last 15 years, the United States has gone from being number 1 in the world in college attainment to number 9 in 15 years. This is such an important issue that the Secretary of Education has said that America's number 1 education goal is to go from being is to become number 1 in the world again in college attainment by 2020. So you've got an issue that really matters. Well, if you're going to have a results market, you also have to then have some result that you're going to measure. That result's got to be something that's valid, objective, feasible. Well, we've got that too. The measure can be college enrollment, whether they go to college, and then persistence, whether they stay. It's straightforward. Whether a kid's in college or not, they are or they aren't. There's no mysticism to it. So we actually have a measure that we could use. Now we get to the tricky part. That common data source. Well, the news is the common data source already exists. There's a nonprofit organization called the National Student Clearinghouse that has a database covering 93% of all students in college in America. So if you're involved in a mentoring program or school district and you want to actually know whether your students are going to college, where, how long they stay, use the National Student Clearinghouse. Let me give you a sense of how economical it is. The state of Vermont wanted to track every single high school graduate from every Vermont high school in the year of 2008 to see who went to college and how long they stayed. Do you know how much it cost them? $1,000 to track the entire state. 2 years ago, we did some policy work around the Recovery Act that's resulting in a deadline of this September, September 2011, when 48 states, every state except for Texas and South Carolina, will report the college enrollment rate and persistence rates for every one of their high schools. So we've got this common data source available now. So now let's take a look at what needs to be done. Well, the first important step is making the data public. So I mentioned how Congress and states have made a lot of progress in creating the measurements so we can actually see which high schools are sending students to college and how long they're staying. There's one more step that needs to be taken. Congress needs to just simply make this data public. Those conversations are going on in Congress right this minute. And one thing, if I've learned one thing about public policy, it's that everything drives on networks. So I've learned to just let people know who we're talking with, because I'll bet you that there's at least one of you in this room who has a relationship with one of these folks. John Klein, Buck McKeon, Duncan Hunter, Richard Hanna, Dennis Ross. These are all leaders on Capitol Hill who are working on this issue. And if any of you know any of these folks, please email me. I'd love to talk with you about their leadership role. And my email's right there, JBSchramm, my name, @collegesummit.org. Final step we've got to take is we've got to pilot it. A number of nonprofit organizations are going to be wary of this. They're going to wonder, is this measurement system really valid? Some may say, there's so many things that influence our students' performance. I don't know if I want to be held accountable for this measure. Well, what we know is that if there's going to be any kind of results market, the nonprofit community's going to need to trust it and participate. And so to help move this along, College Summit is willing to be the guinea pig. We're willing to pilot it. And we're in a good position to do that. We've got the scale. We're in 12 states, 180 high schools with 25,000 students. We've got externally validated results showing our schools getting an 18% increase in college enrollment rate, which basically is closing the gap between low and middle income students by 50%. And their persistence rate in college is 79%. So we've got results. We also have leading backers. Some of our leading supporters are the Gates Foundation, Deloitte, whose CEO is our chairman. But also, most of our philanthropic dollars come from individuals, including some members of the Naples community, Scott and Kathleen Kapnick. We're willing to be the pilot for this, and we're willing to have our revenue contingent on getting results as measured by this system. So we really do have an opportunity at this time to not just survive the next few years, but actually have our country make progress in education and poverty reduction if we can channel our dollars to what works. If any of you are interested in exploring this and helping us try to build this, we'd love to talk with you. And again, find me later today or email me. Thank you.